Ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Okay, let's go. Hey, Last in Line, welcome again to another episode in February of Continuity of Care. And we've talked about this a couple of weeks. And as you know, the Continuity of Care, the CARE, has letters and bullets behind it that are really foundational principles to what we're trying to accomplish. The platform here, last in line leadership based on Mark 9:35, where if anyone desires to be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. So that's what we're really trying to convey here, the perspectives and the stories from faith-based leaders who know how to walk this out, who have had struggles, overcome struggles, and they're going to share their stories. And I have a great leader today. His name's TJ Todd. And so he lives in the North Carolina area. He's a native New Orleanian, which we love about him. And we're gonna read a little bit of his background. So he is the CEO of Studio 490. Which is a creative services company. They do digital marketing, they do branding, they do promotions for folks. They just kind of help as a consulting resource for people that are trying to get digital and promote their brand. He's got over 30 years experience in creative communication and men's ministry. He took over a nonprofit called Uncommon, which is really bent towards building men as leaders, dads, husbands, followers of Christ, building their faith. And he took that over, I guess, about 2016. And so what his heart really is for that ministry is to see men succeed and have an impact, really kind of in their families, communities, and ultimately in a broader spectrum of the world. And he's chosen to make a difference and develop content through that platform. And encourage men to really just be what they've been called to be as a husband, as a dad, as a leader. So, without any further ado, I want to welcome TJ Todd to the show.
Well, thanks, John. I appreciate it, man. As soon as you say New Orleans, I start smiling, right? Right now, we've been living in Charlotte for about 14 years, and I only get homesick about once a week now, so it's gotten a little better.
Only, all right. Well, you're getting there. And
right.
It's okay, man. Hopefully you've let a little of that culture kind of bleed into where you are currently.
Oh, we do. We'll fly up crawfish once a year and do a lot of crawfish boil in the backyard, and we put out our Mardi Gras stuff in the front, the flags and little signs, and
there you go.
So yeah, we bring a little taste of New Orleans to Charlotte.
That's very cool. Very cool. I love the food, of course. Who doesn't? I love the culture, the history, just the architecture, all of it. And most of all, and most importantly, I love my Saints.
Amen.
So that's where it kind of not in that order about what I love about New Orleans. Hey, no, audience, I think you picked a good one to sit in on here, because we've got some gold about to be dropped in the middle of your world today, because the continuity of care, we've talked about continuity, and it's not a word we use every day, but I mean, we need to get familiar with it, because I think it's more about consistency. It's about a continuum that is unshakable, that stays on its path regardless of circumstances and situations around us. And continuity of care, the letters we have, CARE, we're going to talk about courage, we're going to talk about attitude, resilience, and ultimately empowerment, because that's really where we start to put legs on this and to really start impacting the world around us. So I'm going to dive right in. And is there anything about yourself besides what we talked about that you want to share? You mentioned your wife, Dana. I don't know how many years you've been married.
Holy cow. So we just turned 31 about 2 weeks ago.
Congrats, man.
We met in 5th grade. Our first date was the 9th grade prom, back when I had hair. It's fun memories. And so, but yeah, we have 2 adult sons, and so all of us work together at Studio, and all of us also work on Uncommon content. So we always describe it as we're just like Duck Dynasty without the money or the beards.
Man, what a dream, though. I mean, that would be, I'm sure there's challenges with seeing your family every single minute of every day in a professional environment, but I would say that that's got to be pretty rewarding, especially, as you're watching that next generation kind of follow and help you build content for building men. And man, I think that's awesome. Talk to us a little, give us a backstory about Uncommon. And then we talked a little bit about its purpose and the heart behind it, but talk about just the vision that you're continuously having and the impact you're making.
Sure. I mean, there are tons of men's ministries out there, and I'd hate to say we're just one of the mix. With a name like Uncommon, we try to step a little bit outside the norm, right? And try not to use the churchese kind of dialect and talk about things like pornography, talk about competitiveness. Your spouse is going through menopause, empty nest situations, work-life balance. We challenge, right? So we want to challenge guys while we encourage them. And so for us, we describe that as speaking with truth and grace. And so you can't have one without the other. No truth and just grace, you don't get the message of Christ. And all truth and no grace, you don't get the love of Christ. So it's important for us to try to encourage men and encourage ourselves too. We don't say, you should do this. We say, we need to do this. And we feel that God is saying we all need to do this. And so we all need to work on being more Christ-like.
That's good. I mean, the world needs more of that. The world, hopefully, like you said, hopefully there is a lot of that going on throughout the country with men's ministries. So, I mean, let's make this outline bend a little in that direction toward an audience, let's say, of men who are leaders. Maybe they're not a CEO of a company, but they're leading a family, or they're coaching a baseball team or whatever. But let's talk to guys today and let's peel back the layers on courage a little. Courage is a big word, and it can have many definitions, I think, to different people, but I want to hear what your perspective is and talk about what courage is, and then talk about why maybe it feels like there's a rub there and why it's so hard to demonstrate it today.
Right. I think courage is tied to ego in many guys' world. And that's just a, small jump to, the kind of car I drive, how I dress, the kind of job I have, house, money in the bank, all these things. And, I look at courage, be willing to do something that God says is right, that maybe our culture says is wrong. Standing up for your faith, or at least just being consistent. So number one prayer request and email we get from people are about broken relationships or marriages. And so we really try to be supportive and challenge, encourage guys to be, one, Christ-like, two, consistent. Yes, everybody wants to, be the hero, I think, in their play or their story, but there's something very godly about being the husband, the dad, or leader in your family, in your community, in your world. And so I would wrap courage around something like that.
That's great. Yeah. And then, obviously it's not overly, or it's not as common as it should be, let's say, in different pockets of our culture. Courageous to me is, again, doing sort of the abnormal. Like you said, the uncommon. I love the name. And really kind of being countercultural in a lot of ways today, because some of the ways the culture wants us to go is really not how it was intended from the beginning, 2000 years ago. And so, I don't know, I'm raising 3 boys and a daughter, and it's one of those things where you have to show it more than you have to speak it. And so hopefully we're doing that in the sphere of influence that we're in. But I think I've got people watching that feel like maybe they are, courageous, because it seems like one of those glamorized words of well, somebody tried to take a lady's purse and I stepped in. And I mean, that's great. That is heroic. That's courageous. But I think doing the little things on a daily basis and being consistent with those and walking the way that we were supposed to in purity, our morals, our values, and doing that, really without a spotlight on us, to me, is courageous.
Exactly. Everybody wants to be on that mountaintop. And there are times when you're at the base, but most of the time we spend our lives right in the middle. We're always up and down that mountain. And so, how you handle those in between moments are just as courageous as any flashy, showy, and thing you may do in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Do you have a time you could maybe, because we love stories, like everybody's got a different one every time I bring a guest on, and everybody's perspective is different. Can you share a story of where you may have had to dig a little deeper than you wanted to sort of stay on that course and be courageous in a moment where maybe your flesh or circumstances were trying to pull you off that?
Yeah, we're about stories here at Uncommon. So we experienced Hurricane Katrina. My family and I were born and raised in New Orleans, 40 years, literally blown out of town with Katrina. Spent about 18 months in Arizona, Chandler, Arizona. And when we first got there, it was just chaos, right? Because we didn't quite know we'd ever have a house again. I literally didn't have a job anymore. We're kind of homeless, jobless, and everything in between. And so I remember sitting at a Red Cross shelter, and if there's anything more humbling, having to have people give you suitcases full of like toothpaste and socks and underwear and, that kind of stuff. It's very humbling. But the lady was like, so I'm looking at your bank account, and if you were to go and withdraw like $500 out of your account, I could give you $2,000 toward whatever your needs are. And I said, you know what? I said, I really don't want to do that. I said, I feel like that somebody else could benefit from that doesn't have that situation, that they may not have the $500 to even take out to qualify for that. I said, if I don't qualify for it, I don't want that. And she looked at me like I had a third eye growing out of my head. And she explained it one more time. And my boys were there. And I'm like, look, we don't want to get something that we're not qualified for that can benefit someone else. And we had to fight this lady off for about 5 minutes, trying to get us to work the system a little bit. I understand her motive was trying to help, but I just thought it was a good teachable moment for me and my family and everybody involved, that there are times when you've been blessed to a point where maybe someone else needs that more than you do. And so during that period when you didn't have a whole lot, everything you knew had been basically just upside down, $2,000 was kind of like hitting a lottery. But I look back at this today, here it is. That was 2005, many, many years ago. And it's still fresh in my head. And I use that as an illustration often when we're talking to people about, situational responses.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate, and not to something to that degree, but, being part of that whole experience, I was living over in that area at the time as well, and dealing with Katrina, and actually I was leading a team of about 20 salespeople and doing operations and transportation, which that was all put to a halt, of course. But there was just so many challenges and opportunities to either show courage or, sort of let the situation compromise who we are. And it sounds like you made the right choice there. And that would have been a very hard decision because of the provision they were offering in that moment. But no, I think that's awesome. And I hope your kids remember that, maybe they remember that. Maybe you've talked about it. I think it's good to talk about those things even after we exhibit those traits. I think it's good to remind people, hey, not to brag, but just say, hey, remember, I had an opportunity to do this and I didn't. So, yeah, courage is, I have it, in here first to talk about, because I think it's important to ground ourselves and define it and sort of frame this whole talk up around what are hard decisions, what's going to drive us to make those hard decisions in the right direction, and what's unshakable within us that doesn't waver. What are the non-negotiables I talk about a lot. And I think that's awesome. And it sounds like since you had a foundation of faith and knowing what your values were, it was probably easier to make that decision in that moment than someone else who maybe didn't.
I do believe that our time in Arizona during Katrina just galvanized us in our faith, in our family, and we all drew closer to God. So those kind of moments really, really impacted us.
So good. So good. Well, as we now that we've built that foundation and we're kind of building a 4-wall structure here with courage, attitude, resilience, and empowerment, let's go to that. Let's put that second wall up here and in our house that's built on solid ground, attitude, man. Attitude's another thing that I think protects us in a way if we have it lined up, I guess. And it's one of those that is less impressionable and less of a roller coaster than some people, because, man, I'm going to tell you, I've struggled with this in the past over the years and maybe still today, but less because I'm aware of it. And I have to be intentional about setting a good foundation with my attitude first every day. Or I can get left of center real quick. So what, give us an idea in your mind of how important and why it's important to have an attitude, and what attitude you think is the one to really start your day with.
For me, I kind of like, and I was reading through the document here, I kind of transposed my attitude for wisdom. And for me, it is the prayer I pray most consistently. Every single time I pray, I ask for wisdom, godly wisdom. And so reason why I do that is that, I have a friend that we've been in counseling with him for a while, that he struggles with, he lets his, situation dictate his attitude. And so I said, I want to pray for godly wisdom, because that does not change. My feelings and my attitude may move around a little bit. And so I know that I can trust that godly wisdom does not. So for me, I think if I can rely upon godly wisdom, seek ye the kingdom first, all things will be added after that. I think if I can start there, then that is going to direct my thoughts and actions. Like if I don't start with godly wisdom, then here comes TJ's agenda. Here comes TJ's opinion about things. And TJ is often wrong. So let's just focus on, some godly wisdom, godly counsel. And that way we know that we're on good, like you said, good foundation.
Yeah. Well, and so on the guys you disciple and minister to, stories you've heard, similar to that example, somebody listening right now thinks, we're going through one of the worst times in history right now. And, culturally, so, in society, our social media is blowing up. Our pandemic is not going away. Economics, a new president, whatever. Attitude is getting blown around a little. Because it's becoming one of those things that's wavering. What about the guy listening that's like, man, I don't know how to control it. I don't know. I can pray for wisdom, but to somebody that's not maybe as in tune with what that feels like or looks like, and they're into those tangible results, right? And their faith is kind of iffy sometimes.
Sure.
How can you help them with their attitude?
I think setting an expectation. So I think if we can, even if you are not on fire for Christ right now, and you found that your faith has taken a bit of a hit during, say, the 2020, let's stop tying our joy to a situation.
Yeah.
Because even if COVID was not here, you tie your joy to your job, you can be fired tomorrow. You tie your joy to a politician, I'm just going to pray for you now, because You are skating uphill, sweetheart. So if we can stop tying our joy to a situation and set proper expectations, that may need to stop right there in a sense of, okay, well, I don't know what that is. So, well, let's take some time and pray about what could bring you joy. Maybe getting in God's word, spending some time in God's word is a great place to start. And it's like we always should start, really, to help set expectations, because, everything we deal with is kind of touched on in the Word of God. I mean, there's murder, there's theft, there's adultery, there's lying, there's all these things that nothing new that we're experiencing now is new to the world. Like, oh, look what we found,
right.
A politician who lies or whatever. That's not new. So, spending time in God's Word, I think, can help a believer in any part of the curve that they're on, help set better expectations around their attitudes.
Man, I love that, and I love that perspective, because we haven't talked in the last couple episodes on attitude. We haven't heard the word expectation. I think that's pivotal. Like, that's huge, because that does sort of land the plane for that guy that's listening that isn't sure about where to go in Scripture to feel better. Right. Feel better, quotes, or but he can relate to what you just said. And expectations, everybody has them.
Right.
Whether you acknowledge them throughout the day, you've got an expectation. It's either good or bad, really. Like, there's no middle ground, I think. And we can control that. That's the beauty of it. It's a choice. Our attitude's a choice. It's how we see whatever lens, what lens we're going to pick up that day is up to us. Right. And like you said, if it's about your job that you're focused on and that's what drives your joy, man, that can be fleeting. That can come and go. And I think it's perfect that you talked about joy, because it's a different animal than happiness.
Right. We always say
those are two things.
Joy is a perspective. Happiness is a feeling.
That's right.
And so, always, you can't steal my joy because it's not tied to anything but Christ, so right. I know some of these are church terms, right? We try to avoid that. That's what I was saying before. We try to avoid some of those church terms, in the sense of like that guy who, he only goes to church maybe once, twice a year. He never reads his Bible, kind of thing.
Right.
But you have expectations. You set them. What if we set them properly and ground them in Christ? And so we can start there. I think it's a great place to start for anybody.
Totally agree. And what I would say too is, even if we do get a little churchy right now, the other way hasn't really proven great results, has it? Like, for those that aren't standing on that, right. You've done it your way for a while, and where's that gotten us? I'm living proof of it. So, I mean, I think it's maybe time for a shift, and maybe time for you to do more than kick the tires on your Christianity, on your faith, and maybe just go all in with it, So, that's a great perspective, man. I always talk about that. I mean, attitude is something everybody talks about. You'll hear, a lot of these motivational speakers are talking about attitude and perspective, and they should, because, there's a reason that we all talk about it. So, as we lead into sort of the next piece, I hope we can get some decent examples here, because this is where I think people listening are going to maybe walk away with something that can change their life today. And that's hopefully a goal, is that somebody leaves different than the way they clicked on this link to watch. When they log out, hopefully they're seeing something different. And resilience. So if we're talking continuity of care, CARE, we're on resilience. And I mean, we could go a lot of different directions. There's a lot of heat, a lot of pressure, a lot of friction out there.
Sure.
And nobody, the Bible talks about, those situations are not uncommon to everybody. Nobody's bulletproof. So give me give me what you think the temperature is in society right now when it comes to resilience, and where we stand as a people, and how we how we go and fight and battle through those tough times. I mean, are we handling it right? Are we more resilient than you thought, or are we really kind of underwhelming in that regard?
Underwhelming would be an understatement, I think. And it's not just like this generation. I think every generation has had its issues. Like I'm 52. So my father and his father probably had some huge communication issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did not know how to communicate and lead their families well. But our society today, because everybody is, the word cancel culture, right, has become a topic. And we just wrote an Uncommon original about this. And we use Jesus as an example of, they were following Jesus when they thought he was going to do, like what they wanted him to do. And as soon as they found out he wasn't going to be doing what they expected him to do, everybody started to fall away, So,
yep.
But in today's society, I think that we have a hard time hearing truth. And so we were talking to and I won't say the organization, I was talking to a pastor of a church and that I'm familiar with. And I asked them, why don't you ever talk about sin? You use the word struggle and storm and challenge, but you never use the word sin. And he said, well, we'd rather talk about the things that we're for rather than the things that we're against. And I said, that's heresy. That's not what Christ, died for. He died for your sins, not for your storm or anything else you want to candy coat it with.
It's good.
But we have a hard time hearing truth in today's society because we're always like, well, I'm offended. I'm sorry. The gospel of Christ, if he has to tell you that you're sinning, yes, that's going to be offensive. Yeah. And unfortunately, if you don't respond to that, then there's a consequence to it. And so, but we always say truth and grace. And so I think if I had to rate this on a scale of 1 to 10 in today's society, I'll be generous and give it a 2, because I do know some people who are, still hard about it, about the Father's business, but as a society, boy, we have some incredible work to do.
Yeah. So what, I guess when we talk about resilience, we're obviously talking about, how to persevere through adversity and things that are constantly coming at us and maybe knocking us off course when it comes to our family relationships, our careers, our finances, our physical bodies, whatever. Resilience can be under that umbrella. It can be all of the above. So can you tell us about a time? I mean, obviously you went through Katrina and you probably had you could list a lot of things where you had to be resilient, but is there a time maybe in your professional life, if we're talking to business leaders right now, is there a time that you exhibited that and maybe what were some of the road hazards along the way as somebody tries to have that resilience, that strength, and I have a feeling I know where you might go with this, but talk to us about a moment in your life where you had to really keep your head down and get through a situation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, being an entrepreneur, I think anybody out there that's small business that has kind of put in some time and it's been around for a number of years has seen the economy do this. And we've always been really good about praying about God, you're in control of leading people to us. Our job is to serve them. Mm-hmm. And so we've been approached several times, I'd say about 2 or 3 times, from industries that were very lucrative. I'll use one example, the adult film industry. We were contacted about doing a website for them, somebody, and we told, no, absolutely not. You're in the wrong company. I said, if you ever been to our website, you kind of know that, we're a Christian owned and operated.
Right.
And he's like, well, before you hang up, realize that we'll pay 4 times the amount what you would usually charge, even more than that. And absolutely not. And so, you'll think back to those are the easy kind, right? Those are the easy ones. But I was talking to a friend of mine who was applying at Apple. And this is back in Arizona. And he was asking my opinion about, he was applying at a job that was going to be probably 70 to 80 hours a week for about 18 months and was making about 500 grand a year. And he said, would you, sacrifice your family for that brief time to make that much money, knowing that it could really help get you out of debt and get things set and that kind of thing? I'm like, absolutely not. I don't have to even think about this one. I mean, what you're going to lose, the time, the moments, the teachable presence in your family, you'll never get back. And that 500,000, that could be 500 million. You'll never get that back. And so, it's easy to get wrapped up into, well, I got to make enough money to provide and make enough money to withstand this storm, right? But, being resilient, I mean, we were dealing with Katrina for 2 years, and you read about in stories in the Bible of, Joseph or say the Israelites in the desert. I mean, years of time had passed. In today's culture, if we go through a bad afternoon, like, I feel I'm so persecuted. I'm so offended. Where's my moment? It's like, so I think being grounded, in like your analogy, being grounded, having your house built on firm foundation, really will help with any kind of resilience that you're facing. Because, your storms are different than my storms. And even though we all go through them, we have a story we wrote on with Katrina, with 2020 stuff. It was called Same Storm, Different Boats. It rains on everybody.
Wow.
We're all in different situations.
Wow.
So I think the constant there is the presence of Christ in our lives can really benefit us in any situation.
Man, that is good. And it sounds like, see, I thought I was all caught up, but it sounds like I'm a little backlogged on some of your new material. I got to get in there and get caught up on your content, man. I read like every one that there was to read by about mid last year. So I got to get off the bench here and get back into it on your stuff. But hey, man, I like what you were talking about when it comes to, because it sounds like resilience through temptation. Some of the examples you used of the guys with were tempted with dollars, or you were approached by somebody with dollars. Temptation can be any flavor, something that is kind of hanging out there that might bring a temporary benefit, but sacrifice your ultimate core values. And I think we got to all develop some sort of qualification criteria ahead of time. Like, we can't wait till those moments come to us and then flip a coin and think, okay, that doesn't feel right or whatever. We got to have those things built in ahead of time. Right. And I think that's why people who are better at being resilient are, because I'll give an example. We just, in Houston of all places, this week, we had record low temperatures. We had snow, we had ice, we had pipes busting, people without power, water. I mean, we're on the tail end of it, I think, but it just has been a chaotic mess. But you know what? A week before, knowing this was happening, like, I was out wrapping my faucets outside, right? I wasn't waiting until the temperature was 15 degrees to go do it. I was getting those things lined up. I made sure my generator had gasoline. You start, and I think everybody to a degree was doing that, but it's all about preparation. And to your point about resilience and those moments that will come at you, I think we're more successful if we build that in ahead of time, build in those checkpoints ahead of time.
If I could just, put a bow on that and you hit on it perfectly, Ephesians 6:10-18.
Yep.
Put on the full armor of God.
Yep.
And I won't read it all. That I encourage you guys to go out there and read it on yourself. But let's see, trying to scan here a little bit for it says about being ready. Put on the full armor of God so that you can stand against the devil's schemes. Notice that is a before the battle. You ever see a person try to put on armor during a battle? So you won't be doing a whole lot of playing when the game starts.
That's right. That's right. Well, good. I mean, I hope somebody got that. Maybe that was one thing that they can start doing ahead of time. Not if it happens, but when it happens, will you be ready? So, coming toward the end of the outline and some of the things we're talking about with continuity of care, again, this is all about developing those practical tools that can, that are unshakable, non-negotiable, that can allow you to be consistent, that continuity, the continuum of these foundations, the courage, the attitude, the resilience, finally, the empowerment. So we've talked a lot about ways to empower yourself in certain situations. And that's really what it is, because if we're not ready, I mean, okay, guilty pleasure, full disclosure. And I'm 48, so this is going to probably rock some people's world. So I listen to Christian rap when I'm working out. All right. Contemporary Christian rap. Okay. So there's a guy who I love, what do you say?
NF,
Oh, NF. I love him. But so Andy Mineo says, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So you can relate to that?
Yes. So I cut my teeth on rap, back in the days. And when I got saved, I was 25. And I started listening to a bunch of stuff on like the Air One. And one of them was from Cross Movement Records. And so recently I had the joy of meeting the people who founded and sing in Cross Movement Records, John Wells. It's called Tonic. He and I worked on a project for a number of years, art contest, and he's here in Charlotte.
Cool.
And so I'll name drop John Wells. Thank you, brother, for letting me meet you years ago.
So cool.
So, but yeah, it's funny to hear, another
That's
person
awesome.
that likes,
That's right. That's right. So anyway, so that the point of us staying ready before we, so we don't have to get ready is, like you said, you can't put on the armor during a battle. So what are ways maybe that you give us some, if a guy's got a notepad and he's listening to this, maybe one or two practical things that you do, because you and I, we're a little longer in the tooth than some that might be listening. So we've done it wrong and we've done it right. What are some ways that you've found that are sustainable that have allowed you to kind of empower yourself to be ready?
Sure. An active prayer life. I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we don't have a consistent fellowship or relationship with God. It's impossible to know God's will without communicating with him in prayer. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you put it toward a parent, if you never speak to your mom or your dad, you'll never know what they want you to do, right? Like, I don't know, never talk to them.
Yep.
Reading God's word daily, getting in the word and reading about these stories that are for our benefit. Thank God there's a Peter in the Bible who's a knucklehead like me.
Yeah.
Thank God there's a Thomas who doubts like me.
Yeah.
A Moses, a David, a Jonah. So those are there for my benefit, for your benefit. And for the guy who is not active in either one of those, I would say, don't put yourself in bad situations. Surround yourself with good character, godly people. That will help you keep your goals, your perspective, finding a mentor. If you are struggling with where to start, find yourself a godly mentor and learn, ask questions, listen. And so I think those are some great ways to start investing in yourself, always putting on that armor, always focusing our eyes on Christ. And so I don't think you have to be, a 30-year-old mature Christian, in your walk to start that. I think you can be a one day old Christian and realize that you need help growing.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, having that accountability partner, that mentor, right before you said it. So that was perfect. We went right where I was hoping you were going to go. Um, I'm going to say some of the things that prevent us for that empowerment piece, like some of the things that kind of get in the way, and those hurdles, man, and they're not necessarily sinful in nature, but they impede our progress. And so those things like fear, insecurity, those things, we make a lot of comparisons out there today because we can see everybody's deepest, darkest. Nothing's sacred if you don't want it to be,
Right.
And so we're making comparisons all the time about what I don't have, who's got this and who got the promotion and who didn't. And what do you say to that guy who, the insecurities are overwhelming because he's constantly comparing, to, and it just kind of happens. It's not that it just, comparisons are right. We just have to deal with it. It's not whether or not we're going to have that struggle, but it's how do we deal with it? Talk about fear and insecurity.
Well, I tell you what, for guys who, beat our chest about, manliness and, like, look at me kind of thing. We are some of the most insecure people around that,
Yeah.
a direct hit to a guy's ego, whether it be his job or his family or whatever it is. It really shakes us to our core sometimes. And some of those guys, I mean, they're posing as if nothing affects them, but deep down it does. And so that's what the statement, hurt people, right?
Yeah.
That they've been hurt, so they want to hurt other people. And so I think that, we're trying to chase down something, whether it be that job or that dream or passion type piece. I think we want to focus on, is that dream or passion within the will of God? There may be things that I have wanted to do or prayed for in the past that, thank God for unanswered prayers, as Garth Brooks, the great theologian, said.
Absolutely.
That was not in the will of God. That the years that we spent in Katrina, I didn't have the skill sets to start my business and run Studio or Uncommon before then. The things I went through there, that 2-year period of learning new things, directly allowed me to start Studio. And then that enabled me to be open to step into the leadership role of Uncommon. And so if our dream or passion is just that, a dream or a passion, I mean, if it's not in the will of God, you're going to struggle trying to do that. And, what are you getting out of that? If you're going to chase down something, is it just money? Is it prestige? Think about how it's going to impact your family, impact you. It may cause a lot of stress, which impacts your marriage, impacts your family. So fear and insecurity, anxiety, boy, it just comes standard with this model, right? It just comes built in. But, I think the more we take those things to Christ and lay them at the foot of the cross and do not pick them up when we leave that conversation, I think the more progress we can make on just being more Christ-like in all those areas. They're always going to have fear and anxiety about things, but the less you take them to the cross, the more they're going to impact your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm living proof of that. And thank God for not getting what we want, but getting what we need when we need it. Right. Like, I couldn't agree more, just from times that I thought I was ready and I wasn't, and we try to outrun God, and it's just not a good recipe. And I'll say to the guy that maybe he can't grasp or conceptualize, the will of God for his life. Like this is a thing that's out there, kind of like the Wizard of Oz, that no one ever sees or knows what that's about. Like, it's one of those, to some guys, it's the will of God. Like, how do I know? Like, so that immobilizes them immediately. But I'll to the fear point, we're on this hamster wheel of being fearful of failure because we're constantly relying on the same source of strength, which is us.
Yeah.
Which is us or our environment. Like, that's let us down before. That's been a constant disappointment, which keeps feeding the fire that is our fear. Like, I'm speaking from experience. So if there's a guy that's relating to what I'm saying, just I encourage you, lean on something else. Lean on somebody bigger than you. I mean, the person that wrote the manual probably knows how to get you out of the situation or get your mind right to not let those things just kind of melt into the fabric of who you are. Like, you can deflect these things easier if you're grounded in something stronger than you, bigger than you, a God that made you. Like, he knows how you're wired. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I felt like somebody needed to hear that, because I would have loved to have heard that 10 years ago. So I don't know. Yeah.
We all need someone. It's not like, I think some guys think that I don't need anyone. I'm a self-made man. That shows weakness. I think you're doing yourself a huge disservice and setting yourself up for, when you fail, you will fail catastrophically. And when you're talking about your internal soul, well, now we're talking about a whole different set of failures.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And to paraphrase the Bible, it's kind of a Southern interpretation, but, for the guy that doesn't have anybody around him when they fall, bless your heart.
Bless your heart.
I mean, it says, woe to him who doesn't have guys around him when they fall, because not if, but when, and you're boxing yourself in, and you're limiting God whenever you're relying on something just solely you in the natural and your own strength. So hope that empowered somebody today, because, otherwise we just have to cross empowerment off the list here of our outline. But no, I think we covered some good stuff. Let me give you one sentence. Since I didn't prepare you for this, I'll only do one. And we go off script sometimes. But you seem like you're a Saints fan. You can handle anything. So, hey, so finish this sentence. People will know TJ Todd was here and was a man of faith leading men because
of his legacy.
Which is?
My family, my faith, the ministry. Nothing about him, but things I leave behind.
Yeah. Okay. Good. No, that's good. I always ask guys, what, if you had a footprint and we look back at the path you walked, what are we going to see? What's it going to say? What story is it going to tell? And I think here today, it's evident that TJ has made it about somebody else. It's not about him. And it's about pouring into other men. It's about pouring into his family and leaving building a business together based on, scriptural biblical principles. It's about relying on a God who unquestionably has it figured out, made us. He's not surprised by anything we're going through. So, to close this out, I'll just say, well, first, tell them where they can find these new materials and content for Uncommon.
Sure. So the main website is uncommon.org, and it's spelled MEN at the end of it. So it's uncommon.org. So there you can go and sign up for our newsletter. You can see all the weekly blogs we send out. It's every week. If you want to download our app, we just launched a new app recently, about 2 weeks ago. We did our new website first of the year. So we kind of hit 1-2 punch in 2021.
Nice.
But We have also, we develop monthly content that goes on YouVersion and devotions there, as well as on Olive Tree. And we just partnered with Go Tandem and Back to the Bible to share our content there as well. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Definitely going to download the app when we hang up. So yeah, no, I appreciate it. And listeners, audience, thanks for joining us again. And I know that there was some things unique to TJ's story, his life, his experiences, his perspective that we haven't heard before. So that's the beauty of this platform, the beauty of these outlines. They may be the same, but the perspectives are different and what you walk away with is different. So I hope you're walking away just a little better than the way you showed up today. I know I did. So I'm encouraging you, go find his materials, go to Uncommon, go get that content because guys, it's a life changer. I've read some of the stuff and you won't be able to put it down, but it's practical. It's real talk. It's not sugar coated. It's truth, but it's grace. And I would encourage you because you will be better and you will be able to apply some of this stuff. So I want to thank you on behalf of our listeners again. TJ, thank you again for being here. And everybody, until next time, be blessed.